Serial is brought to you by Seven Stages Theater. Where else? Please note that the opinions of our hosts and guests are entirely individual and don't reflect those of Seven Stages.
Seven Stages is a professional, nonprofit theater company devoted to engaging artists and audiences by focusing on the political, social, and spiritual values of contemporary culture. For more information, please visit us at sevenstages.org and be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. This week's episode is brought to you by ArtSpot Productions' Sea of Common Catastrophe, playing at Seven Stages February 2nd through the 12th. From creator Jeff Becker and New Orleans-based ArtSpot Productions comes a story of a couple displaced by rising waters.
As our own neighborhoods change due to gentrification, what happens when we're forced to leave? What rises in our wake? Join us for the discussion on this week's episode of Serial.
Welcome to Serial!
Yay!
Yay! The show where two crunchy interns give you the scoop on our season. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Ryan.
And joining us today is the one, the only, crunchy man himself, Caskey Dyer.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here. So, we're going to play a game to kick off the podcast. It has nothing to do with what we're talking about.
Fun.
But you have a really cool name. So, we invented this game called Caskey, where we're going to list off some things, and you have to tell us what your favorite thing is in this category. So
It has to be fast. You got like a minute.
It has to be like under 60 seconds.
All right, got it.
So we're going to yell out.
So, we're going to
Yeah, don't look. Don't look.
Okay, am I doing it?
All right. Ready?
Ready?
No.
Oh, come on.
No, go.
You're born
go.
ready for this.
Just go.
Go.
Okay, favorite color?
Blue.
Food?
Cilantro.
Okay, sorry. Just go. Band.
Don't judge him. Band.
Death grips.
Nice.
Celebrity crush.
Oh, Allison Brie.
Nice.
Animal.
Wolf.
Cereal?
Special K with those dried strawberries in
Oh,
it.
hell yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, really good.
Preferably-
Planet. Oh, fuck.
Planet?
No, go.
I mean, I was about to say preferably mixed in with some yogurt, but I'm going to have to go with Earth just because, like, I feel like if I don't pick it, it's going to visit some kind of vengeance on me.
Yeah,
I got to get on Earth's good
So
side
you don't
here.
want a bad
Yeah.
rap with the aliens.
Season.
Fall.
Harry Potter spell.
Accio.
Favorite Clinton?
Chelsea.
Beverage.
That's what I said too.
Favorite beverage.
Orange juice.
Favorite what?
Dog.
Dog breed? Okay.
No, or just dog. Just general dog.
Just
Mutt.
favorite.
Pokemon.
I was really into Latios and Latias for no good reason. I just thought they were really cute.
Musical.
Oh, hell. I'm really not doing well with this whole snappy answer thing.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
actually,
s-
we're just gonna kick you out.
I'm going to say Rent just because it's the last one I really remember getting into.
Sorry, that sounded like I was judging you. I'm not.
You like rap.
I thought I was edgy in middle school.
Oh, we all did, Caskey.
But
Movie.
we weren't.
Movie? Favorite movie? Favorite movie right now is The Sting.
Never heard of that.
Favorite condiment.
Condiment? Cilantro.
Cilantro on everything.
Hell yeah.
What's your
Cilantro
favorite,
all
like,
day.
cilantro-based dish?
Fancy ramen. So basically, like, you boil carrot slices and broccoli, and then like fry some onion slices and maybe some kale seasoned with salt and garlic. Toss them in, throw an egg into the boiling water, and then top it all
my
off
God.
with some cilantro. Also, yesterday I made this plate with crackers, hummus, pimento cheese,
I love
sliced carrots. But then I got this little bowl with olive oil, and I tossed in some salt and cilantro into it.
Wow.
And we ate that for like an hour.
It's like
Can I just
gourmet.
hire you to make food for me?
Please.
It's like,
Okay,
I've
cool.
always been trying to crack the case of like how to make ramen taste better,
Yeah.
and
Right.
that sounds.
Listen, when you're not
amazing.
working for senators, or what is it? What is it you're doing? You're working for
State representative.
state representative.
When you're not
What's
running
his
for
name?
president.
Is his name
Her
Alexander
name.
Hamilton?
Her name.
Yes!
Yeah.
I just want to give you a high five for a minute. Okay, go.
Yeah, so I am currently I'm currently an intern for State
Mm-hmm.
Representative Park Cannon. She is the newest addition to the State House of Representatives, if my memory serves me correctly. She is fantastic. She represents District 58, which, if y'all know, your Atlanta neighborhood sort of starts off with like a little bit of the Highlands, then Old Fourth Ward, then it comes down a bit through downtown, and then huge swath of Southwest. And she I think embodies what it means to be a representative. She is always out in the community, I have to give a disclaimer though, of course, like, everything that I say are my opinions and my opinions alone, and I'm of course not going to speak for her. But she's fantastic, and I encourage anyone listening to look her up and see what she's all about.
Nice.
Awesome.
So. But you're still in Lawrenceville, right?
God, no.
Oh, you're not? Oh, just
No.
kidding. I was like, that would be a horrible commute.
Yeah, no. Well, I'm in Athens actually,
Are you
That's
kidding me?
even worse.
and I'm commuting. I'm commuting about maybe 2 to 3 days a week, maybe tops. But
Oh my
yeah,
god.
just audiobooks and brooding is how I pass the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of brooding.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm in Decatur now, so it's only like 30 minutes to get here.
Yeah.
But
That's not
still,
bad.
just like traffic, just
Yeah,
every day,
exactly.
it degrades your soul.
Mm-hmm.
I just want like a magical cloud to transport me to anywhere I want to go.
Mm-hmm.
Public transportation cloud. That'd be great.
A nice publicly financed rail cloud that actually goes.
I love rail clouds.
That actually goes
my
in
favorite
another
kind of cloud.
direction besides up, down, side to side.
Yeah, really.
We're gonna talk about that on this.
Yeah,
that
We're
is a
gonna
topic
talk
of
about that
conversation.
even more
Good.
because
How much we hate Marta.
We love We love MARTA. We just want more of it. That's what I want to
Yes.
say.
Yes.
We
more
love
Marta.
We
Very
just.
well said.
I don't see enough of MARTA. It's
Yeah.
like.
Hey
someone
girl,
did-
where you been?
Exactly.
Mom.
Where's Marta at? I don't see her on the northeast or
Exactly.
the southwest side. I don't go diagonally, baby.
Exactly. So, for those of you who don't know, Atlanta has a long history of displacement. But Atlanta was actually the first U.S. city to open a public housing development, Techwood Homes, shout out, in 1933. But as of 2011, Atlanta was also the first city to close all of its public housing.
You've read the same research papers I have. I remember that line. It's a powerful line.
So, plagiarism 101.
No. It's good that people are looking at that.
No, yeah. We've been researching just a
Good.
little bit.
That's awesome.
Anyways, so the problem is, when public housing closed, there was no real alternative for the people who used to live there. Some people were given vouchers that was amounted to, let's see, it was $568 to $758 per month, which, that's pretty nice, from the Housing Authority, Atlanta Housing Authority. But it was not available to residents with a certain criminal background. So people were judged by certain criteria. And if I remember correctly, it looked like it was only like a third of the people at most. Most people did not get vouchers to relocate. So essentially, people had nowhere to go. Either they were homeless or they found housing farther out.
Yeah, and that became a huge problem, and it's still a huge problem for the entire Metro Atlanta region. And it was only exacerbated with the Great Recession that the levels of suburban poverty in the outlying Metro Atlanta, second and third tier suburban counties, the level of poverty in those counties is rising a lot. But there's actually a really solid argument that to be poor, and of course, living in poverty in the inner city and very highly concentrated poverty is bad, and there's a lot of research that says it is bad. But there's also, I think, a very reasonable argument that says in some ways to live in poverty in the suburbs is actually worse, because in the cities it's kind of messed up that we have this instant connotation in our minds of the inner cities with poverty, but because there's that association, there's actually a lot more foundation dollars put in the cities. There's a lot more concentrated social services that people living in poverty can easily access. But what has been happening with Atlanta, as is the case with a lot of metropolitan cities across the United States, is that as affordable housing options within the city shrink, people move out to the suburbs, and there aren't as many social services out in the suburbs. And if there are, you got to drive, 20 minutes to get to them? So there's a case to be made that it's actually, you're putting people at a disadvantage to move them out to the suburbs, which has traditionally been this place of, great social upward mobility, but a lot of people are finding themselves very isolated there. And being from Gwinnett County, I can attest to it.
Shout out.
It's just that they can't afford the cost of living in the suburbs.
It's not necessarily that. In some cases, it could be either more expensive or less expensive. The problem, at least with this particular argument, is the concentration of social services. So, for example, the Brookings Institution did one study where they looked at private foundation dollars per person that was cost burden in 4 different metropolitan areas. In Atlanta, they looked at, I believe, Denver, Chicago, Detroit, and Atlanta. And in almost every single measure, Atlanta had the lowest amount of private foundation dollars. That's less than the Detroit metropolitan area.
Yikes.
So yeah, that's only looking at is private foundation dollars. But even if you look at, say, government-funded social services, I think you'll find that suburban counties are a lot more hesitant to incorporate those significantly into their social fabric, because as the history of, say, Atlanta's relationship with Cobb County shows us, a lot of people in the outlying Metro Atlanta suburban counties are very hesitant to consider the fact that what they consider Atlanta might be leaking into their counties, and that's a reality they'll have to deal with.
Yeah. I know an issue in my neighborhood, back in Lawrenceville, was... Okay, here's the thing. This conversation is so hard to have without bringing up race, because it's so closely linked. I know in my neighborhood, property was not as expensive, so we started having less of the yuppie white 90s family coming in, and as that happened, we had neighbors who genuinely, like, white flight was real. Like, they genuinely left because the neighborhood was less white.
Oh yeah.
So it's such a complicated topic to even approach, because somewhere in there is blatant racism in the way our neighborhoods are viewed as what's a good neighborhood, what's a bad neighborhood.
Which starts with poverty, because it is so, like, when you're in, like, dire circumstances, you're more likely to turn to crime.
Exactly.
And because so many minorities are impoverished, it creates that implicit bias, which makes people associate, I guess, black people or certain minority groups with crime. But I guess the question is, like, how do you make it so that the people who are in those communities are able to have access to the same resources, or the resources that come when they develop those communities, without, like, driving them out? Like, how do you make it so that everybody is able to enjoy that?
Yeah. So at least in what I've seen, this is a really multi-pronged issue, because on the one hand you have traditional communities of color that, as the economy develops, are seen as, of course, these neighborhoods with a lot of character, and so you get this massive influx of traditionally young, upper middle class, white professional class. And then you have to deal with the displacement and where are these people going to freaking go? You've just kicked them out of their neighborhood. Then there's the problem that, still incorporating race into this, is that especially in the years leading up to the 2008 financial crisis, racial minorities and ethnic minorities were actually viewed as a very profitable housing market to sell houses to. If you go all along Buford Highway, you'll sort of see the effects of very targeted marketing, particularly when there were a lot of Southeast Asians coming into the Atlanta area, and a lot of them refugees. You had landlords that were specifically targeting these refugees. And even in my neighborhood in Atlanta, there are neighborhoods that are popping up that are pretty much designed for migrant families. I don't know if either of you have seen the movie The Big Short recently, but there's this great little scene in it when they're talking to these two I think real estate developers or mortgage contractors, and they're saying, oh yeah, we target the immigrant families because they just want a home. And that's not saying anything about the moral character of these families. Owning a home is a vital part of the American dream. But so whenever we talk, I think, about economic development, that's really important, but we really need to specify the kind of economic development, which is the problem I think you're getting at. Because on the other side, if we were to just be satisfied with the answer, oh, we're selling homes to people, I don't think we can be satisfied with that as an idea of economic development, because you get the kind of predatory lending that you saw in the lead up to the financial crisis. So I really think that the kind of economic development we needed, especially in neighborhoods like Atlanta, is one that doesn't really operate on necessarily the same traditional logic as our economic models have been relying on. Right now in neighborhoods like Inman Park and Old Fourth Ward, you're seeing a lot of development, but it's still sort of like it's pretty much the same kind of development we've seen, just with a lot more like right angles and pastel colors and like, you know, like built-in televisions. I don't know, like it's more of a design ethos than anything else. But it's not something that I see that is very inclusive, that is necessarily very sustainable, as much as these businesses want to talk about going green. And I don't see it as something that really makes use of public space and emphasizes the sharing of space. It's actually really important when people live in an area that they feel like that area is theirs or that they are a part of it. And the more and more these design choices say, or, you know, the choices about what building gets built where are decided by a very small cadre of developers, I think the more and more alienated people will feel from their neighborhoods.
So do you have any examples of a successful development that does build that sense of community and public space?
It's difficult to say, because I think, especially in a lot of the economic development success stories, we're using measurements that are a bit more traditional, but I still think there are a lot of examples throughout the U.S. of certain local policies that at least have a mind towards the inclusionary. And I think one of the best examples is the inclusionary zoning ordinance. This is a policy that has been enacted in a bunch of different ways in a bunch of different cities across the country. I think the best example is in Montgomery County, Maryland, where they've had this going since like the 1970s. Basically what it says is that for any new residential development, say that's like over 20 units, so maybe you've got like a big old apartment building coming in, any single building like that has to set aside a certain percentage of those units to be affordable to households making, say, below 80% or 60% or 40% of the area median income. Usually it's around 80%, which means that, you know, if you're really not making a lot of money, you still probably won't be able to afford that. But that's a kind of design choice and a kind of, you know, housing policy choice that thinks about what it is that makes a neighborhood inclusive and diverse and welcoming. The problem, of course, is that if you don't design that policy exactly right, you're still going to get neighborhoods. I mean, there was one story of a housing complex that, you know, set aside all these units, but they actually put them at the back of the development and had a separate door, and they called it the poor door, because that's where, and like that's not, you can't just say slap an IZ ordinance onto something and call it inclusive. And that's something that Atlanta is really going to have to work out, because there have been talks about doing an IZ ordinance in Atlanta for a while, and they actually, I think, just started putting it into motion. But you got to get those specifics really, really right. And it's something that I think anyone listening to this, anyone that's interested in housing, needs to really keep an eye on, especially as Atlanta goes forward, and really hold people accountable to their promises.
Right. Yeah, and I thought I saw that the buildings who were required to set aside a certain number of affordable housing units, that was only developers who were receiving public funds for it? What's the deal with that?
So IZ ordinances usually have a lot of caveats or incentives. They're not they're not one size fits all. There's a lot of different ways you can do them. So some of them, it's not necessarily mandatory, but governments will incentivize businesses, and so maybe they'll like give them a density bonus or whatever. And then sometimes they come with caveats. So just like you were saying, if they're receiving public funding, then they have to do this. Well, that limits your pool of, you know, developments that are going to have to set aside units to be, you know, affordable to people making below a certain amount of income. And it's something that, from a really hard-line realpolitik policy perspective, it probably makes sense, because the city of Atlanta is having to think about, you know, they're trying to have to balance their options versus like, okay, we want to maximize the amount of affordable units we have, but we also have all these developers. And Atlanta and Georgia is a huge real estate state. And like, I mean, you can drive around Metro Atlanta and you can see that we are really, really big into real estate, and it makes sense. There's a lot of money in it, and there's a lot of space here. But so the city of Atlanta is having to balance the needs of its population with the desires, I'll say, of those developers.
Well, I've also seen the argument that if you have an area that is more upscale, then you can tax them higher, and therefore you can use that money to help the public. But I don't know, I just feel like that feels a little trickle down to me. Like, that just doesn't feel
I wonder, like,
effective.
how do you include the residents who are already in an area that you're intending to develop? How do you include them in the conversation of like, what they want to see happen in their community? Because like, do they feel like their communities need fixing, or is it like an intrusion?
So there's a really interesting example of this that's going on right now with the Turner Field redevelopment plan. For anyone that doesn't know, basically, Turner Field kind of failed as an economic venture, and you can actually still see some of the remnants of what was going to be this big entertainment district around there. And so there was this plan that both Georgia State University and a developer that I think is called Kennedy Developments, they basically had plans to turn it into an extension of the GSU campus with some student housing, and it's going to be mostly some retail space on the bottom and multifamily residential on top, with also like a few entertainment spots. But the people of Turner Field, or in those surrounding neighborhoods like Summer Hill, especially Summer Hill, they are really, really serious about this working for them. And of course, like I don't think that anyone is like, will completely say that, like, we trust the developers to everything, but they really are excited about this. And what they did, this is incredible actually, there was a study commission called a Livable Centers Initiative, or Livable Communities Initiative, LCI is the acronym, and they did a long-term study about what the situation was in that area, the economic condition, the social condition of these neighborhoods like Summer Hill and Peoplestown and Mechanicsville. They drafted up this huge document, and they held several community meetings, and I kid you not, they actually got little tiny wooden blocks and had people from the community put them in like the arrangements that they thought would be cool, and they used that input to draft up 3 sort of general plans for what this area could be like.
That's awesome.
And that is actual community engagement. That is actual, literally hands-on community engagement. And I remember going to, there was this sort of coalition meeting with a bunch of neighborhood businesses that met at this tiny church, and I talked to a lot of these people there, and they were really serious about making this work for them. Then a few weeks later, I went to a lot bigger meeting that took place at Fanplex, I think it's called, which is one of those sort of aged entertainment complexes. And there was an even bigger community meeting there with people from all over Atlanta getting together and looking at this study. Now, the study isn't necessarily binding. I'm not sure on the specifics, but I don't think that the developers or the city of Atlanta are absolutely required to do what the community says, but they have to take it into consideration.
Yeah.
And I would say that's one way of how you do it. That's one way of getting the community in. Literally, just give them Legos, make people literally shape the space they're going to live in. And I think that's incredible.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I know, like, my dad's a city planner, and he loves doing mixed development stuff, and part of that is engaging the community, but he's found that whenever they hold traditional town halls, people just don't come. And I mean, they always hold them, they always try and get people's input, but yeah, there just hasn't been that much of a response. But I guess that depends on the community.
It totally does.
But I don't know, I mean, I think that also reflects back on the fact that we really do need to get more involved at the local and state government levels, because otherwise all this change is going to happen and we're going to have no say over it. Exactly. But we have the ability to, in most cases. Then again, you don't know how much a developer is going to take your consideration in, but if you don't try, then you'll never know.
I feel like so much of that hinges on the degree to which we identify as being a member of a community, and the idea to which we feel as though we really inhabit a certain space. I mean, like, so whenever I go back to Lawrenceville, and not to sneak diss Lawrenceville anything, but
make that very clear.
I'm dissing Lawrenceville.
I'm dissing Lawrenceville. You go there, and anyone that's been through Gwinnett County can tell you this. It doesn't have a sense of place.
No.
You can't get around meaningfully without a car.
Mm-hmm.
There are very few public spaces that are like easily accessible by walking. Usually, it's like big roads and big highways. I mean, the city is built for cars, and so even when I go back there, and even when I grew up there, I didn't really feel like a Lawrencevillian. I just felt like I was biding my time until I could get out. You know, conversely, in a place like Atlanta, which is very dense, and like, don't knock density, because, you know, cities are people-sized. As much as how big they are, you know, they are people-sized. Suburbs are car-sized. But cities and that sort of high density where you can basically walk to everywhere, that's a people-sized area. And walk around Atlanta for long enough and like actually engage with businesses and go out and like meet people on the street and talk to them, you'll start to feel like you're there, and then you'll start to really have a stake in protecting it and, you know, growing it.
So you're saying a sense of community sort of gives you more motivation to want to build and
Yeah, exactly.
develop that community.
Pond City Market brings up, I think, one of the quandaries about, or one of the problems about gentrification that a lot of people squabble over, which is that it legitimately does bring in business, it brings in jobs, it raises incomes, it stimulates economic growth. I just think that at the end of all of that, we have to add, for whom does this stimulate economic growth? This is a problem that ties directly into what y'all are talking about, displacement. Because if you want to just look at, say, if you want to like look at a city and then carve out a little circle there and say that, all right, we made some decisions, we moved some stuff around, and now this area is doing a lot better. But if everyone that lived in that circle is now living in a circle 20 miles away in an outlying suburban neighborhood,
You just like rearrange the furniture.
exactly. You've just there's this scholar David Harvey that
D. Harv, as he's
Harv.
known on the streets.
Oh yeah, he's got cred.
Yeah.
He has this really interesting quote. I don't endorse everything he says, but he's got this fantastic quote where he says, "Capital doesn't solve its problems; it just moves them around," and that's what displacement is. It's taking a problem in an area and saying, "Let's fix this area," and you just move the problem elsewhere.
Like Patrick in SpongeBob.
Yeah.
Is it?
When
What's
you
that
move the
quote?
whole town.
Do the quote. Do the quote.
I don't know the exact quote.
What is it? What is it?
We'll
You
take all the dilapidated houses
Now you sound like
and
Bernie.
push them somewhere else.
You actually sound like Bernie Sanders when you do that.
Can you do a Bernie?
Can you do a Bernie impression?
Look, the people of the city of Atlanta are sick and tired of I can't think of anything topical to say.
I will say,
It's true.
Ryan has been doing his Bernie impression.
No, I
Ooh,
don't
really?
I don't want
really
to do mine
good.
now. Yours is a
Oh,
lot better.
come on. Bernie off.
No, are you kidding me? Don't make me compete.
Do it. Do it.
No,
Do it. Fine. Ryan is a
I can
coward.
do his brother.
Let it be on record. Yeah, do his brother. Do his brother.
Can I?
What did he say? He said,
Our parents would be very proud of Bernie and his accomplishments. I proudly endorse Bernie Sanders.
there you go. I love
The
his
crowd
brother.
goes wild.
I love his
good.
brother so
Oh,
much.
that's really good.
I wanted to ask, what would you say to someone who says they don't care about the people who are being negatively affected by this, as long as their communities are nice?
So there is a fantastic article that was written by a former UGA grad student, I believe. I forgot what his name was, but it was the title of the paper was "Where Can I Build My Student Housing? The Politics of Studentification in Athens, Clarke County, Georgia." And Graham Pickren, I believe, was the author, and y'all should all check out this paper because it is fantastic. He used this term that had been used in a few other papers before his, but I found it really, profound and moving and poignant. He was referring to people that occupy the student housing developments in Athens, Georgia, that are the sort of fenced-in, gated community, all amenities included student housing developments that are very comfortable, that are very insulated and isolated, in which you really don't really have much need to leave. The thing is that people are coming into these as students, and so it's probably their parents that are picking up the rent.
Most
And
likely.
Graham Pickren used the term gentrifiers in training, which I found to be a great phrase, because the implication is then that people start off in this housing market accepting this as the norm, that when they go into a new area, they should, one, find housing accommodations similar to the ones they've already found that are really comfortable and really insulating, and where they don't really have to worry about the outside world. So the process of them being a gentrifier becomes the norm in their mind, and so then they move to a place like Atlanta. So if you have, so say like, someone's coming to Atlanta for the very first time, they're coming into it and they're not necessarily seeing. I mean, it's not like I was conscious during the 90s, but I kind of knew what was going on in Atlanta in the 90s, and I had parents that lived here, and doing some research, I learned a little bit about the history. So I know that, like, Inman Park didn't just start out with, like, all of these really brand new shiny buildings. But if you're young and, like, you know, you're a professional and you have money and you want to start, like, you know...
Sorry. Okay, continue.
If you want to start, like, making your way in the world, which is completely fair. Everyone should be able to make their way in the world. But moving into an area without knowing the history or, you know, how that area got to be the way it is now, you don't necessarily appreciate everything that's come before you. Maybe you're just thinking to yourself, as I'm sure every one of us have felt whenever we enter into an area that seems built for us, wow, this is really cool. I really want to live here. And that complacency is what allows these changes to keep happening. Developers wouldn't build if they knew that there would be, you know, like, widespread, you know, opposition to this. And, you know, people would actually start voting with their money. People wouldn't move to these places. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got was
Michael Haverty whistling in the background.
Ruining our podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, our artistic director making music.
Just has to make an entrance.
Anyways.
So one of the best pieces I ever got was, if you really, you know, want to sort of style your consumption habits in a way that combats gentrification, move to an area that's already gentrified and isn't in the process of gentrifying. You know, these things are being built because they know that people are going to, like, rent them, and they know that people are going to buy them, at least for the time being. Who knows if this is going to end up to be a bubble, because real income hasn't risen since 1979, and housing prices are going up as incomes are staying stagnant. So there's gonna get to a point.
You should have said that in a Bernie voice. That would have been awesome. Redo it. All right, here we go.
People have not seen wages increase since 1979. And I forgot what I said after that. But
that was really good.
I think the point still stands.
Exactly. Exactly. A bird flies. Everybody applauds.
Yeah. But so yeah, it's. If people don't realize, you know, what they're doing in that sort of space, then not only is economically that space going to stay the way it is, but also just culturally and socially and even psychologically, they're going to continue to dominate that space in a way that isn't very inclusive to people that can't afford to be there. If you walk into a place like, say, downtown Athens, which is, I would say, and I think many other people would say, becoming more and more gentrified, there are a lot of people that are homeless that are on the streets of Athens.
Yeah.
And, like, they are a part of our life. That is their life. We are a part of theirs. They are part of the fabric of downtown. But if you're coming into downtown Athens and you only know it as the, you know, shiny place it's becoming, you're going to see these people without homes, and you're going to think, what the hell are they doing here? You know, I don't need that. I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to deal with this.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of attitude that I think is fostered when you have people moving into these really insulated, really nice, comfy communities, and then they get, you know, a taste of some real shit. And, like, I don't think that's healthy.
What would you? Why do people need to care?
Because I think that I think the survival of the human race entirely depends on our own recognition as the fact that we are a species that is dependent on each other for survival. And as soon as you start withdrawing it, not only are you becoming, quite frankly, an uninteresting person to know, talk to, or interact with, but you are literally a detriment to the survival of the human race, and you will give the people with the power and the money literally everything they need.
Where is the balance between the government helping out lower income families and private companies helping out families? Like, how much of a responsibility morally does the government have and should use? Yeah.
So I think this is a really interesting question, because it sort of reminds me of the question that people had after the financial crisis, which was, who's at fault, the government or, you know, private companies? And I think that's sometimes too neat of a distinction, because a lot of times I think that if government and private companies are on the same page, perhaps ideologically, about what the best way is to go about things, then really the only difference is what resources are immediately available to them. I think we need to see changes on both sides. I think that the government needs to really start embodying the social contract, the idea that a Republican government exists because the people will it so. And I think that the government, if anything, is an incredible tool to use to better the living conditions of everybody, which is why I would support very socially and economically progressive policies that try to lift everyone up, perhaps regardless of, their marketability. I also think that we tend to sort of factor corporations and private entities out of the social contract idea, but especially in a global, geopolitical system in which multinational corporations are more powerful than a lot of states are, and these are like country states. I think you have to start rethinking private entities as things that are like, the small businessman that is like just his part in the, because it is a man in the old times. Small business owners.
Gender neutral business person. Boom.
In the 1920s?
Just kidding. Not in the 20s, no.
Yeah.
No.
I'm talking.
She's dropping the future.
I'm dropping the future at
No,
you.
exactly. I'm saying that it is outdated to think of like the small
No,
businessman
it is,
who
yeah.
is like separate from the social contract, because now you have corporations that control
Yeah.
very like large amounts of wealth, and I think that it's like
The top 1%.
Exactly.
yeah, it's like
Email Bernie coming in.
99%
even
of
if
the
it's
wealth in the
not
country.
even if it's not ideal, even if it's not ideally what you would want to happen,
Yeah.
because ideally you want corporations to be independent from like, I guess, social fabric. I think practically, and this is where I don't think I'm being an idealist, practically, if you want to level the playing field and raise living standards for everybody, you have to start recognizing that corporations have a hell of a lot of resources
Yeah.
and can probably be doing more to help, raise people's living standards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the key to it is be involved with what's going on around you and don't discount anyone as some sort of destructive force
Yeah.
until you hear their opinion
Exactly.
and what they have to offer.
Exactly. And that goes everyone across the board. Everyone across the board has an opinion that's at least worth listening to, but also let's try and like share the conversation a bit. And I'm like speaking now to the people of my demographic.
Yeah. It's so easy to be complacent. But God,
This is our world.
this is my world.
It's our world.
A new decom by me. It's our world.
Featuring
that sounds
me.
like a Michael
Directed by
Jackson
me.
song. Oh wait, no, he did "We Are the World."
That's why it sounds like a Michael Jackson.
Was that the one where he's walking through like a desolated forest?
Yeah, I think so. The children. 7 Stages remix. And then it just ended.
I don't know the words.
One day we'll have our own set of remixes by the theater, for the theater.
I think you should add in and sample as much as you can the sound
Cereal
of
noises.
cereal pouring.
Yeah.
And also, yummy.
Okay. Should we end the podcast?
Do we have
Is it
anything
still-
more? It's still running. I mean, running, and that's the uncategorized notes. Yikes! So
I think
much
we
research.
covered a bunch.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we I without even looking at this. Oh, we didn't cover the fact that the Olympics were essentially used as an excuse.
Oh,
Oh,
the
you're talking about-
Olympics!
Oh, the Olympics, Rio 2016. Just kidding. We're talking about 96 Atlanta.
Those were
Just
weird
kidding.
Olympics.
20 years
Talk
ago.
to me about the Olympic mascot. No, just kidding. Talk to me.
Is it? What is it? What is
Is
it?
what exactly?
What
What
it?
is he?
Yeah, what is he?
What is he?
Yeah.
The blue blob.
So yeah, the 96 Olympics. That was sort of the start of the end for Atlanta public housing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the actual, I suppose like you could trace it all the way back to how public housing was funded from the beginning, because the funding system set up, at least on a federal level for public housing, was that the federal government would front all of the initial capital funds, basically to build it, and then it was up to the local housing authorities to fund it entirely through rents, and that didn't really end up working. And so you had this like massive decline of public housing, not as the problem was that a lot of people tend to think that bad X means X is bad, and that was certainly the case with public housing when people saw legitimately dilapidated public housing units, and they thought, well, public housing as an idea has failed, we need to go the mixed income route. And so Atlanta actually was one of the worst for public housing. I mean, we had like been on, I think, the HUD's watch list for a while.
We had what was it? It was I had some stats in here. Oh yeah. It's like in East Lake Meadows. which is one of the largest public housing projects. At one point, crime was 18 times the national average, and employment rate was only at 1.9%. But the facilities themselves were, unlivable.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really disgraceful that we allowed it to get like that and just sort of went like, because
then you just kind of like pen in whatever's unfavorable.
Exactly, yeah. And that
just seems wrong.
Or you can use a massive influx of funding, say, I don't know, with the Olympics, as an opportunity to revitalize these neighborhoods and put in mixed income units.
They didn't.
I mean, they totally revitalized them, but
by literally destroying all of them.
And it's not, and I'm not saying that bad demolition of public housing doesn't mean demolition of public housing is bad, but I think that you can measure whether or not it is bad by how those people do afterwards.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of real, I think, solid data on how people have done. I mean, I know that Georgia State, there have been a couple studies that have come out of that have looked at how people with housing vouchers have done. And it says that they sometimes go to slightly better areas, but generally they basically still move to comparably impoverished areas just in the suburbs.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's just people had ties there, and as much as we want to decry and vilify public housing, there's a great documentary called The Pruitt-Igoe Myth, which was about the infamous housing developments that were torn down. That a lot of people have seen the videos of these really blocky public housing units being demolished, and they interview former residents, and they were all saying, yeah, there was crime and it was dilapidated, but I had friends there and my family lived there and I had a community there. And displacing people like that, it especially hurts elderly residents who have been there for a long time and built up all these social connections. So to just send everyone out with housing vouchers, you're destroying, you're changing a lot more than their source of livelihood. You're changing the social fabric of their being, to put it in really lofty terms.
Yeah. But I'm trying to think what a solution would be. I guess the only other thing they could have done is make better housing ahead of time and move, have new public housing.
Have a housing solution before.
It's just so hard because it's you see all this horrible stuff going on and you want to find some sort of solution, but you're is there one?
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of it has to do with the federal funding mechanism. Yeah. You can't, it's really hard to do public housing and have it be this really economically thriving area when you're depending entirely on rent income and rent revenue.
We can just get FDR to come back from the grave. Fix this, that'd be great.
Yeah, it's...
If you're listening, FDR, we'll be at 7 stages. Let us know.
But somehow try to make a new deal that actually benefits people of color this time.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for talking to us, Caskey.
Thank you for... I apologize for rambling.
No, you educated us.
You do intelligent
so
rambles.
much.
I think the world needs more intelligent rambles.
Yeah, really.
I just go...
There's a lot of unintelligent
for
ones
2
out there.
Yeah.
But thank you guys really much for having me. I really appreciated this. And yeah, and of course, a disclaimer to both y'all and anyone listening, I am not an expert. Do not take anything I say for granted. Use all of this as a basis for your own individual research. Never listen to what a disembodied voice coming over the internet tells you. But really, 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 this is an important issue, and I think it's going to be a defining issue of this generation, is gentrification, if it's not already. So education is empowering, and, really get out and, get out into the community, see what it's changing and talk to people that have been displaced.
Very wise words.
And don't forget to come and join us for Sea of Common Catastrophe, happening February 2nd through the 12th at 7 stages. If you want to join the conversation about gentrification, that sounds really... It
sounds like a rap.
Hey guys, it's me, DJ Sarah. If you
want to join the conversation about gentrification...
Only the hippest social issues.
Yeah, 7 stages.
Sweep in the nation.
We're hip.
Okay, really though.
Okay, for real. Pharrell.
Okay, if you want to join the conversation... Hey! If you want to join the conversation about gentrification, come and see Sea of Common Catastrophe, playing at 7 stages, February 2nd to the 12th.
And we didn't get to talk about this at all, but visually, it's stunning, it's awesome, it's beautiful. So even if you're one of those people who maybe listened to this and didn't care as much, no matter what, you will enjoy the show.
Just
it's
appreciate
awesome.
the art.
Appreciate the art.
Come see
Support the
theater.
art. Come see theater. It's great, but also care about gentrification.
Please care. It's important.
Signing out. Serial 2016 remix.
Boom. Peace out.
That's it. Oh man, I'm gonna edit that. Like, come see the
Come see the show, please. We need the money.
Please, we need. Speaking of ways to get money.